My name is Matt Coburn. I write code for a living. I work at. It doesn't matter where I work. I need to get this down because it's been sitting in my head for 2 months and it's not getting any quieter. There's a version of what happened that people at the office believe, the simple version. And I'm the one who gave them that version, so it's not what happened. This is what happened. At this company, we do these overnight deployment pushes, like constantly. The e-commerce client has campaigns launching in Singapore or wherever at 2 in the morning, and somebody has to be there to publish it and babysit the build in case something breaks. I've been pulling those shifts for about 8 months by the time any of this started, which it sounds bad, but honestly, the office at 2 a.m. is better than during the day. Nobody's there. No stand-ups, nobody pinging you about a ticket they could have read themselves. Just you and the build and the coffee machine humming through its warm-up cycle, which takes 4.5 minutes. I've timed it. The average across 3 sessions is 4:37, but I round down because it feels less depressing. That many nights and you end up knowing every sound the building makes. The HVAC kicks on every 45 minutes, runs for about 20, and in the gap between cycles is when you hear everything. Elevator hums in the shaft even when it's parked. Half the lights run on motion sensors, so whole sections go dark when nobody walks through. And then you get up for coffee and the hallway flickers on around you, one panel at a time. 8 months of that. I knew what a normal night sounded like. Mira. I've been putting this off for 2 months, so I'm just going to do it. She was on a different team, front end, did the consumer facing stuff while I stared at gray enterprise dashboards all day. She worked late sometimes too. I'd see her across the floor at her desk by the windows with those big over-ear headphones on, screen glowing, oat milk sitting next to the keyboard. I didn't know her. I need to be clear about that. I didn't know her. But I knew her coffee order. Oat milk with 1 sugar because I watched her make it. I knew she'd stir it with a little wooden stick and tap it twice on the rim before she threw it away. Every time. Twice on the rim, then the trash. I watched her close enough to know that, and I don't know what to do with that information, so I'm just going to keep going. She talked to me once, asked if the Wi-Fi was acting up. I said always. She laughed. That was probably the best interaction I had that month, maybe that quarter. I never said anything else to her after that. I just sit at my desk on the late nights, knowing she was across the floor, and think, okay, good, I'm not the only one. I never walked over. I never said hey. I just sat there 50 feet away for 8 months and told myself that was fine. She stopped coming in about a month before any of this. Slack went gray. Tickets got redistributed. By Thursday, her name was off the stand-up board. Nobody said a word because that's how this place works. People burn out. People ghost. Somebody else picks up your tickets, and by Monday, you were never here. So I figured that's what happened. Went back to my deploy queue. Didn't think about it. I should have, but I didn't. So the night this started, I'm at my desk. Deploy is running. Greg's light is on down the hall. Greg's my boss, or one of them. Always around at weird hours, and nobody ever questioned why. This kid Ryan, who had been showing the ropes, he wasn't in that night, so the floor was just me. The whole place quiet. Her section over by the windows, dark the way it's been dark for a month. Coffee machine humming through its cycle, deploy at 12%. About an hour and I got up to use the bathroom, and when I came back, there was something on my desk that wasn't there before. A mug. Not mine. It was Mira's. The one with the chipped handle that used to sit on her desk by the window. I knew because I'd been staring at it from across the floor for 8 months while I pretended to be looking at something else. It had oat milk residue in the bottom, which, somebody probably grabbed it from the kitchen. Cleaning crew comes through at 9. It's past midnight. Maybe they missed one. People grab whatever's clean and leave it wherever. That's a thing that happens. But the residue wasn't dried out. It was wet. Recent. Like somebody had used it in the last hour. And the only other person in the building is Greg, who brings the thermos of black coffee from home every single day. So, I picked it up, took it to the kitchen, Put it in the sink. That's it, a mug. Walking back, I cut through her section. It's shorter than going around, and there was perfume in the air. Not something old sitting on a desk for a month. Fresh. Somebody had walked through there in the last few minutes, and nobody was on the floor but me. I slowed down without really deciding to. The motion sensor lights intersection kicked on as I came through, which makes sense. I'm walking through, but when I got to the other side and looked back, they were still on. Nobody in there, just the lights on, like somebody else had just walked through right behind me. I watched them for a few seconds, and they clicked off. Sensors catch airflow from the vents sometimes. It happens. I got back to my desk and there's a post-it note stuck to the bottom corner of my monitor. So Mira used to leave herself little task reminders on her own monitor. And I have good eyes and she had neat handwriting, so I could read them from my desk. I'm not proud of that, but I knew what her handwriting looked like. This post-it was hers. Some small task note, the kind she'd write for herself. And it wasn't on my monitor when I left for the bathroom earlier, and I was the only person on the floor. I pulled it off and threw it in the trash. Sat down. The deploy was at 60-something%, and I sat there watching it crawl and telling myself that this was nothing. Somebody from the day shift left the mug. The sensors caught some air from the vent. The post-it was there before, and I didn't notice it. I just needed to focus on the build and stop letting my brain do whatever it was doing. The deploy hit 62%. I sat there. Somewhere on the floor, a perfume that nobody was wearing was still in the air. I don't know how much later it was when I looked up toward her section. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe more. But her jacket was on the back of her chair. It wasn't there before. I cut through that section earlier and the chair was empty. Now there's a jacket hanging off it. And the lights over there hadn't even kicked on, which means nobody walked through it to put it there. I got up and went over. I think mostly because I was irritated. Like somebody was running some kind of bit on me, and I wanted to find the punchline so I could get back to my build. I touched the jacket and it was soaked through, this cold weight that didn't belong on an office chair. Dripping onto the floor, a puddle already forming underneath. I held it, maybe, for 2 seconds, and then I just set it on the ground. I didn't want to hold it. I ended up in the bathroom. I don't know, I just needed to be somewhere else for a minute. I pushed the door open, and the mirror over the sink was fogged up. The whole thing, top to bottom, like someone had been running the hot water for 20 minutes. Nobody had used that bathroom since I was in there earlier. The hot water hadn't been on. And then there was writing in the fog, small, neat letters, dragged through the condensation with a fingertip. A fragment of one of her task notes, check with read Thursday. The kind of thing she'd stick on her own monitor. Except it was on a bathroom mirror, and the person who wrote it hadn't been in the building for a month. I reached for my phone, I don't know, proof, I guess, something to show someone tomorrow so I wouldn't sound insane. By the time I got the camera open, the fog was already clearing. It just pulled back toward the edges and faded. And then it was a clean mirror, and I was looking at myself holding my phone up with my mouth open like an idiot. Just me, clean glass, nothing. I stood there for a while. I don't know how long. Just me and a clean mirror and the sound of the HVAC kicking on in the hallway outside. I went back to my desk. Where else was I going to go? I was thirsty, so I got water from the cooler, the one in the kitchen that the whole office uses, and it tasted wrong. Just off. Something underneath the water that my body pulled away from before my brain figured out what it was. I spat it into the trash. People on the day shift had been saying the water tasted metallic for a couple weeks, and somebody put in a ticket about it that nobody followed up on. Tried the tap in the kitchen, same thing but weaker. I didn't drink any more water after that. Then, I saw her. I was walking back to my desk, and she was at the end of the hallway, near the stairwell door. Headphones on, weight on one foot, arms loose at her sides. Just standing there in the hallway at whatever time it was. I'd stopped checking. A month after, she stopped coming to work. I said her name just once. Mira? She turned toward the stairwell, slow, unhurried, and then she wasn't there. The motion sensor lights clicked off down the hallway, going away from me, one after another, chasing the path toward the stairwell door. Click, click, click. And then it was dark. I didn't go toward the stairwell. I went toward her desk. If she was trying to show me something, then maybe it was there, in the place where she used to sit, and I needed it to be something I could see and hold and point at, because everything else tonight had disappeared the second I tried to look at it directly. Her desk was empty, cleared out completely, drawers open and clean, monitor off, surface wiped down. Whatever she'd had there was gone when she was gone. I pulled out every drawer. Nothing. I checked behind the monitor, under the desk. Nothing. And I almost stopped looking. I almost went back to my desk and sat there until 6 a.m. when the day shift showed up and I could leave. But then I flipped her keyboard over and there was a post-it stuck to the underside. One word in her handwriting. Greg. I looked down the hall. His office light had been on all night, but the office was dark now. The door was open. I could see the shape of his briefcase on the floor and his jacket draped over the chair. So he was still in the building somewhere, but he wasn't in there. I went in. I don't know what I was looking for, but something pulled my attention to the bookshelf against the back wall, the one with all the business books that Greg has never opened. I've been in his office for approvals 100 times, and every spine on that shelf is pristine. They're decorator books. Everyone knows it. I started pulling out the bottom row, and behind them, tucked against the back of the shelf, angled toward his desk, there was a small camera, black, about the size of a deck of cards, memory card in the slot. I didn't know what it was doing there. I didn't know what was on it. But the post-it said Greg and the ghost, or whatever she was, had led me here. And there was a camera hidden in his office, pointed at his desk, and someone had put it there. And it wasn't him. I took it back to my desk, pulled the memory card out, plugged it into my laptop. The deploy was still running in another tab. I didn't touch it for the rest of the night. It was weeks of video from inside Greg's office. After hours, no audio, just the camera's angle, Greg's desk, the two chairs, the door, and Greg and Mira. In the last recording, she's backed against the wall and he's between her and the door. She's not polite about it anymore. She's just trying to get past him. And whatever they're saying to each other, I can't hear it, but I don't need to. I watched probably 30 hours of footage to get to that one, and by then, I knew how it started. Him standing too close, his hand on her back when she walked in, positioning himself in the doorway so she'd have to ask him to move. There's one where she puts her hand up, palm out, a stop gesture, and he laughs and takes it down. She doesn't laugh. And then the recordings end. Not because the memory card ran out, because that was the last night Mira came to work. I sat there with my laptop open and the screen dark because the last video had finished and I hadn't moved. The deploy was still running in the other tab. Greg's briefcase was still on the floor of his office down the hall. His jacket was still on the chair. All those nights I sat 50 feet away, watching her make coffee and telling myself I wasn't being weird about it. She was in his office, and she was putting up a camera by herself because she already knew nobody was coming to help her. I was right there the whole time. He was still in the building. I closed the laptop. The elevator dinged by itself. I wasn't near it. Nobody pressed anything. The car just arrived on my floor with a soft chime and the doors slid open. Empty. The panel inside showed it had come from the top floor. Roof access. Maintenance only. Nobody goes up there. I didn't get in. I took the stairwell. She was there, one flight above me, moving up. Headphones on, calm, unhurried, going somewhere she knew. I could see her from the landing below, and I followed her because at that point, I was past deciding things. I just went where she went. The footprints started on the second flight. Wet. Each step had a small puddle, and the water in them was slightly discolored, brownish, wrong in a way that reminded me of the cooler By the third flight, there was a smell. Faint at first, something organic underneath the concrete and metal smell of the stairway. It got thicker with each floor. By the time I reached the roof access door, my eyes were watering and I was breathing through my mouth, and the smell was thick enough that I could feel it in my mouth. Something sweet and rotten that I couldn't stop tasting. There was a post-it on the door handle, her handwriting, one word, here. I opened the door, the roof. Night air hit me, but it didn't help because the smell was worse up here, not better. And it was coming from the far corner, where there was a water tank on a raised platform. Industrial, metal. I didn't even know it was up here. I walked over to it. The hatch on top was unlocked, or the lock was broken, or it was never secured properly because why would it be? Nobody comes up here. I grabbed the handle and pulled it open. The smell hit me so hard, I gagged. My eyes were streaming. I could see the water inside, and it was dark, discolored, the surface completely still. I leaned in, trying to see what was at the bottom, and I heard breathing behind me. Greg was right there, close enough that when I turned around, his face was maybe 2 feet from mine. He wasn't surprised to see me up here. That's what I keep coming back to. He was just looking at me with the flattest expression I've ever seen on another person. His hands hit my chest, and I went backward over the room. I don't remember the next part clearly. My vision went white. I think my hands hit the rim of the hatch, and then I wasn't holding anything, and the water, I was in the water. It was warm, and it shouldn't have been warm, and it tasted like the cooler, except concentrated, except 100 times worse. And I went under and came up choking, and the hatch above me was a square of night sky getting smaller, and then it shut. And I was in the dark. Complete dark. The only light was a thin line around the seal of the hatch where the sky leaked through. Enough to know which way was up. That's it. I tried to climb out. The walls were smooth metal. Nothing to grab to. My fingers slid off every time. Above the water line, there was a film on the metal. Something biological, slick, and my hands just scraped through it and came back down. I couldn't get out. The water came up to my chin if I stopped moving. I couldn't touch the bottom. I don't know how deep it was, maybe 8 feet, maybe more. If I stopped treading, I went under. I screamed. I screamed for help, for anyone, and my voice bounced around inside the tank and came back at me sounding like somebody else, and nobody answered. I kept screaming until my throat closed up and nothing came out anymore. My phone was in my pocket. I reached for it and pulled it out, and the screen was black, dead. It had been in the water since I went in. I let it go. I treaded water. I tried to keep track of time and I couldn't. The thin line of light around the hatch changed from dark to gray to something that might have been morning or might have been my eyes making things up. I didn't know. There was no way to know. The smell was everything by then. It was the air, it was the water, it was on my skin and in my mouth and coating the inside of my throat. Every breath was the smell, and every time I accidentally swallowed water, it was in there too. I'd been drinking this water for a month from the cooler 2 floors down, and now I was in the source, and my stomach knew it. That taste from the cup, I spat into the trash at my desk. That was this. I talked to myself to stay awake. I counted. I went through deploy commands in my head. The whole CI pipeline, staging to production, the flags, the rollback sequence. I ran through Ryan's last 3 pull requests, line by line. And then, my hand touched something. Something soft. Something that wasn't the wall. I couldn't see anything, but I didn't need to. It moved when I pushed it, but it didn't move back the way something alive would. It had a texture my fingers understood before the rest of me caught up. I pulled my hand back. I pushed myself to the other side of the tank, but the tank was maybe 6 feet across. And when I moved, the water moved her too. When I stopped, she drifted back toward me. Time passed. I don't know how much. The light from the hatch seal went bright, then dim, then bright again. A full day, maybe more. I fell asleep at some point without meaning to and woke up choking because my face had gone under. My, ar- my arms were heavy. I'd been treading for so long that my shoulders had stopped hurting and just started. My arms were heavy. I'd been treading for so long that my shoulders had stopped hurting and started just not working right. I kept going. I don't have a reason to give you for that, I just kept moving. Then there was a voice, muffled, from above. Far away at first, then closer. Someone walking across the roof. Matt? Matt, are you up here? Ryan. I tried to yell, and what came out was barely a sound, just air moving through a throat that didn't have anything left. I hit the side of my tank with my palm. A wet slap on metal. Light. The hatch swung open, and there was sky above me and Ryan's face looking down, backlit, and he was reaching his hand in. He pulled me out. My hands were raw and my arms were shaking so bad I could barely grip the rim. He got me onto the roof, and I lay on the concrete and the air hit my lungs and I just breathed. I'd forgotten that air could taste like nothing. Ryan said, "What the fuck is that smell, dude?" I didn't answer. I lay there for a second. Then I pointed at the tank. He pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, leaned over the open hatch and pointed it down into the water. I didn't look at what the light showed. I looked at Ryan. I watched the flashlight angle down, and I watched his face change. I watched his phone almost slip out of his hand. That's enough about that. Ryan never told me how he knew to check the roof. I never asked him. Greg has been missing for about 2 months now. His wife came to the office looking for him. His car was gone from the parking garage. People at work figured he took off with someone because there was a rumor about an affair. Someone heard something once. And that was enough. People go with the simplest story. I'm the one who made it simple. I showed his wife the footage from Mira's camera. Not all of it. I left out the last recording because, I showed her enough. The after hours meetings, the body language, how it escalated. Enough for her to see a man who was sleeping with a younger employee and panicked when it got complicated. Took off, maybe with someone, maybe alone. Either way, gone. And she's sitting there watching this footage of her husband with his hand on a 26-year-old's back, and I'm the one who put it in front of her and picked which parts she got to see. I chose what story she'd believe, and I handed it to her and she believed it because the footage was real. Believing your husband would do that and then run is painful, but it's something you can live inside of. The other version isn't. She stopped looking. The office filled the gaps the way offices do. Someone else took over Greg's approvals. Mira's tickets had already been redistributed weeks before. By Monday, it was like neither of them had ever been there. They don't use the water from the roof tank anymore. I filed the facility's request myself. Bad water quality. Recommended they bypass the rooftop supply and switch to municipal. They rerouted the pipe at the basement junction. Nobody needed to go up to the roof for that. And Greg, well, he's up there now, with her. She's not alone there anymore, and neither is he. Ticket closed.